I'd just like to welcome you along today. Clodagh, thanks so much for taking this session. So this is for those joining us, as I'm sure you're aware, this is about exploring online assessments. And we very kindly have Clodagh joining us from Allstate, who's going to be taking us through this session and talking about what that experience is like for their company. So you find out a little bit more about Allstate and what online assessments are like, and there's learning there as well, depending. Now everyone, and I'm sure Claude will mention this, does this slightly differently, but there will be things, takeaways that you can learn to apply no matter what assessment centre or online assessment that you're going for. So I'll hand over to you now, Clodagh. As I say, I'll keep an eye on the chat box. So if anybody's any questions at any stage, just feel free to put them in there, and I will make sure that we get a chance to ask those to Clodagh at some stage during the morning. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'll maybe just have a look here about sharing my slides. So bear with me.
Can you see them? Are you able to see them up?
No, so I don't see them up just at the minute. I'll maybe.
I wonder why. Does everyone else see can you see the exploring online assessments? That's not up on your screen, is it?
Not for me. I'm not sure what maybe
Let me
the rest
just
of the group
try.
are seeing. Okay, so they can see it, so it's maybe just me.
Let me check if I do the whole, I'll stop sharing and then start again and see if that hopefully rectifies it.
Yeah.
What's that view like now?
Yeah, that's perfect now.
Is that it
That's
now?
great.
Good, great.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yes, hi everyone. My name is Clodagh Nugent. I'm a part of the talent acquisition team at Allstate Northern Ireland. So today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the variety of online assessments that employers use, but I'll go into a bit more detail about our own assessment centre for graduates, placements and interns. So I'll go into a bit more detail as to what we do ourselves. So just moving on then to actually a little bit about who are Allstate Northern Ireland. So we're the largest IT company in Northern Ireland with around 2,400 employees across our 3 sites in Belfast and the Northwest. So we really have a really high focus on entry-level recruitment. Last year in 2021, we hired 93 graduates, and you'll see there that 31% of those were female. And I know that that might seem like actually a small percentage, but given the actual attendance of females in the IT course, it's above sort of the trend and average there. So we obviously have, a few more points. We have our new state-of-the-art building in Belfast. We've recently just got our collaboration suite down on the first floor, which has a lot of pool tables, arcade games. Recently, the talent team went down to have sort of a pool tournament for a bit of team building, and I was the worst, hands down. So thankfully, there's no impact there. And yes, just to touch on as well, we have our in-house learning and development team who are multi-award winning for their graduate program and support for entry level as well. So just on the next slide then, it's just to give you a wee bit of an indication as to what some of our current students say. So Dervla is one of our placement students in the HR team. I just mentioned that 3 words to describe Allstate is fun, inclusive and collaborative, and I would definitely agree. Just down to the bottom there, we have Brona, who was one of our graduates last year, who made a bit of a career change with us. So I think Brona's course was probably a conversion course into IT, but she's just saying that the support is there for anybody that's making that sort of a change. Again, for Tom, a similar sort of experience, but just saying that the ability to learn in Allstate for any sort of entry-level student is amazing, just with our resources that we have and the support of both L&D and TA and HR. So those are just a few quotes to share. I think this next slide, it just shows a wee bit about some of the social sides in Allstate. So you can see a few of our employee resource groups here. So sort of in the middle there, we have WIDA, which is our Women in Technology group. I think that's a sort of a key speaker event that was held. We have our sports and social group down at the bottom there, doing the Couch to 5K. We also have the sort of image there about the computer. It's probably our cyber team who run various sort of initiatives like cyber safety for kids and cyber safety for older adults as well. And then we have our various charities that we support. We have our charities committee in Allstate. So it's just to give you a little bit of an insight into the various social and employee resource groups that we have at Allstate, which play a really big part in life at Allstate, and it's just some of the things that you can get involved in if you joined us. So that's just a little bit about Allstate NI to give you a bit of context. So now we'll maybe get into in looking in a general sense, the types of assessment centres that employers can run. So assessment centres, I find, can usually be sort of the first stage of a recruitment process. So, you know, it's maybe those high numbers of applications. This is maybe the first step for the likes of a graduate programme or a placement year as well. So they're a common feature of entry-level recruitment across a lot of organisations. And what they really are used for is it allows you for practical demonstration of a wide range of skills. So the sort of key focus there is on a practical demonstration. So maybe unlike a competency interview, you're actually putting your skills to the test and they're visibly there. So employers do decide their own assessments to test for skills and aptitudes that are right for their organisation. So they can vary slightly. But an assessment centre could be just one sort of event, or it could on some occasions be a slightly longer assessment day, which could include a mix of assessments which we're going to go through. So the first one to kind of look at is psychometric or aptitude tests. So these are designed to measure cognitive ability, personality tests and work behaviour. So these are usually quite fair and, you know, sort of logically worked out. So some of the tests that can be included is verbal reasoning. It could be a technical test. You know, for the likes of maybe IT, it could be a small technical test. It could be numerical. It could be logical reasoning. Situational judgement, so sort of giving you various examples of situations and taking your course of action on board, and personality tests as well, although I don't think they are just quite as common unless maybe for sort of like a customer facing sort of role. So just moving on then, the next kind of assessment that you could be faced with is an in-tray, or considering online situations now, they might be called an e-tray exercise. So this is measuring the ability to deal with a simulated work scenario. So for example, you could be given various parts of information, various emails, various communications tasks and outputs that you have to consider. Possibly it could be the case that you have been given more tasks than time to do them. So in this way, you'd really be thinking about time management and delegation, problem solving, absorbing a lot of information that might be given to you, and dealing with multiple requests and sort of prioritizing the key things to get done. because you might not have enough time to get through all of it. So it's kind of making those decisions as to what can I do now, what's urgent, what can I defer, and what can I delegate. So that's sort of putting you in a situation of a real work-life day where you are faced with kind of scenarios. The next one then is looking at a group task, which could be done in the form of a case study sometimes, or a role play for certain positions. So this one I'm going to go into a bit more detail on as we go through the slides, as this is the assessment that Allstate would use. We would use a group task as our assessment. So this can be a discussion around an issue or project relevant to the business. And so in this kind of assessment, you're really looking for communication, problem solving, teamwork. There could be a presentation element to a group task. Business acumen, as I said, it's sort of an issue or project that would be relevant to the business, and listening skills as well, which is important in this sort of group and team scenario. So as I said, I'm going to go into a bit more detail on this because it is the assessment that Allstate use. So just generally still, it's a little bit of advice on how to prepare for any sort of assessment that you might be going for. So the first piece of advice is maybe to reach out to the recruitment team or whoever has invited you to the assessment to clarify the format. So it is okay to ask, can I clarify what type of assessment this will be if they haven't done so already. You just want to make sure that you might not need to come prepared with any beforehand tasks. Maybe if there is a presentation element, would that needed to have been done before? So it's just to make sure that you maybe don't need to come prepared with anything beforehand. And just to let the recruiters know if you would have any special arrangements that should maybe be facilitated for an assessment centre. As a lot of assessments are currently online, still, even after we can sort of come into the office now, I think sometimes it suits people better to not have to maybe make a journey into a certain office, or same for maybe those that are assessing it, they could be in different locations. At the moment, our assessments are still done virtually, but we might consider doing them in the office again, or possibly in a hybrid way to sort of accommodate both. So I don't think you'll see online assessments going away very quickly. They'll probably continue in some form for the next while. So if that is the case, it's important to make sure your equipment works and you're familiar with the platform that's being used, whether that just be through Zoom or Teams, or if there's a particular software that might need to be used, or say even a mural board, having that sort of login ready. So just being familiar with that.
Clodagh, can I just interrupt you there? See for
Yes.
if they're sent a link and you're using a piece of software that you're not familiar with, is it possible, like, will that join-in link, I know you'll only be able to speak for Allstate, but will they be able to access that prior to the actual event, just to get in and to try it out and to make sure that it is working? Because I know it's something that came up in a previous, it's actually being able to check that connection with the employer works for them prior to, or can they request a practice run?
Yes, so no, that's a really good question. For ourselves, it would primarily be a Zoom link. So it's really making sure you have your logins or a Zoom account set up. I think if you join the meeting, it'll probably just say this meeting hasn't begun yet or hasn't started yet. But I think if you were maybe worried about a certain software that's maybe being used, which you're not certain if maybe your laptop would be able to accommodate, I think it would be no problem to reach out and say, could we have a small test, which would maybe only take 5 minutes, and just sending an email to say I'm a bit concerned, I want to make sure that the software works, could anyone send me a test, just to make sure. So I think that's a good question, and just to make yourself feel more comfortable, I think a recruitment team should facilitate that.
Thanks.
No problem. So just before going into any assessment, I think it's worthwhile researching the organisation. It's great to obviously look at their website, but I find, looking at the website to gain the organisation's history, what they're about. But I think it's quite beneficial to use social media profiles, whether that be LinkedIn, Facebook, or blog posts as well, just to have sort of some really up-to-date knowledge, to have some really recent information. It could be the day before they might have ran some sort of event or published some sort of news, which might be beneficial to know and show that you're sort of keeping up to date with the company. So also, again, the wider industry for the organisation that you're applying to. If that was Allstate, it might be certain aspects of IT, maybe in software development or cybersecurity, depending on what sort of role you're going for. So this will allow you to be prepared to share your knowledge, views and ideas, especially in the likes of a group task, or indeed maybe an intro exercise as well. So it's worthwhile revisiting the job description just to identify any key skills and your relevant experience. That would be especially true for a competency interview, but I still think it's beneficial going into any sort of assessment where you are presenting yourself. And of course, I think it's worthwhile to visit your university's careers services. So Ulster University have great employability and careers advice and guidance available, whether that be through various resources, to practice or to get some coaching as well. So make use of the resources that are there for you. So just now specifically going into Allstate graduate and placement assessment centre format. So as I said, it is a group task that we use. So just to give you a bit of an idea, we would show this to our candidates before we get into the assessment itself. We would run through sort of some instructions and a bit of a presentation beforehand, just to do a bit of icebreaker and to make sure everybody's familiar with the format of the day and what the task will be. So this just gives you a bit of insight into the format of our assessment centres recently. So we would split into breakout rooms. So once you first join the call, and I would say this for any other assessment, might be a bit overwhelming initially to see maybe a lot of people on the call. It could be maybe up to 100 at times, but you'll find that that's a mix of the company's representatives, the talent team, and obviously then candidates as well. But for most assessments, that will be split out into either breakout rooms if it's done online, or if it's in person, you'll probably be split out into teams or various rooms as well. So our task then is a group task and presentation based around building an app for employee volunteering hours. So you can see there just a little snippet of some of the charities that we have, and something that we have in place now at the moment for advertising the various charities that we can get involved in. So you can see sort of women's aid and digital volunteering, such as the cybersecurity teams. So the task itself, although it's technical in nature, it's actually about, we're scoring for competencies, which I'm going to go into in a bit of detail now. So especially for somebody maybe at a placement or internship level, it's not to be put off by the notion of maybe there's technical elements to it, but it's really how you engage with the others in your group and put yourself forward. So I'm going to go into that in a bit more detail now. But just to explain as well, we would give sort of 5 minutes individual reading time of the task, 40 minutes to work through as a group, and then 10 minutes for a presentation, but that's for the group as a whole. But we would expect everyone to participate in that for at least a minute or two. So that would bring you up to sort of an hour in total, which is relatively short as compared to some other assessment centres. As I said, they may take the form of half a day, maybe sort of 9 to 1, which might include the likes of a group task and then maybe move into a psychometric test in the afternoon. So there could be a combination, but for ourselves it is just the hour assessment, and for those that are successful it's usually a 30-minute competency interview. And although don't want to sort of move into the interview advice, because that's probably a whole separate conversation which we maybe don't have time for, I would always recommend the STAR technique for anybody going for an interview, which in some assessment centre cases they may move straight into an individual interview after a group session. They may then move into individual interviews, so it's just something to consider as well. But they would let you know about that, or if they hadn't, it's best to clarify the format with the recruitment team. Could there be an individual interview after this? So it's maybe just clarifying that as well so that you can be prepared. So as I said, we actually sort of look for competencies during our assessment centre, or certain behaviours. So these are our shared purpose values that we have. So that includes to collaborate early and often, to sort of find solutions and share learnings, to challenge ideas, to leverage collective expertise and create the best path forward, to provide clarity, for expected outcomes and accountability, and to provide feedback that is candid, actionable, and safe. So those are our shared purpose values and behaviours. But I'm just going to go into a bit more detail now as well. So in terms of some tips for sort of being assessed on competencies, especially in a group task, it's important to listen carefully to the instructions given beforehand. So for example, the breakdown of the timings, it might be worthwhile to really digest those. We give individual reading time before we get into the task, so that's sort of your opportunity to really consider the instructions and maybe clarify anything that's not clear. So in a group task, or sort of most assessment centres, you don't need to view it as necessarily as a competition. In our case, in Allstate, all candidates in the group could be successful and brought forward for our next stage. So though that might not always be the case across other organisations, for ourselves that's the case. So in that way, it's okay to be considerate and involve other quieter members of the group. But obviously, overall, you should keep focused on your own performance. One sort of key thing we find in assessment centres can be a timekeeper is a really good way to put yourself forward. Once you sort of enter that group scenario, it can be easy to sort of really get into the task and almost lose track of time. And if there's a presentation section to do, that can creep up quite quickly. So maybe offering to be a timekeeper or a note taker, because there can be some really great things said, but as you start to come towards the end of the task, it might be forgotten. So it's useful to maybe put yourself forward as a timekeeper or a note taker. Active listening skills, it's beneficial to show that through summarising some of the points that have been made, especially by others in the group. Maybe saying, "Oh, I remember you said this, Jim. We should maybe bring this forward into this part of the task." So, or maybe summarising, what the group has discussed so far. That can sort of show that even if maybe you weren't, maybe if you were slightly quieter while those discussions were happening, you're obviously actively listening and sort of being able to summarise the key points that were made. So as I sort of mentioned about the timekeeper, make the time count. It might feel like time is going by very slowly, but it's actually a relatively short period of time for us as employers to get to know you. So get involved straight away, and that I know that can be difficult, especially with nerves, and especially in a group setting as well. So even if you're maybe not quite confident to put an idea forward, say for example on our task about creating an app for volunteering. It's even just initiating conversation through maybe questions such as what's everyone's thoughts. You might find that you're in maybe quite a quiet group, just being able to maybe start that conversation. Does anybody have any thoughts on this? Does anybody know how we should maybe approach this? Or if maybe conversation is happening and you're maybe struggling to get involved, it's maybe seeking that clarity or that feedback on, can you explain what you mean by what you've said there? Or trying to just initiate the conversation and put yourself forward. So on the other hand then, although you are maybe trying to influence and persuade others, with your ideas, it should be done in a diplomatic sense. So it's trying to avoid to maybe be overbearing on the other side of things, because we're not necessarily looking for the loudest member of the group. You want to make sure that you're allowing others to be heard and maybe not being overly assertive with how you think the task should proceed. So it's kind of a balance to be found there. So just moving on, I think that, yeah, that's us towards the end. I always put this photo of the office in, and Shannon, my colleague, always tries to make me remove it, but I think it's just a funny one. So does anybody have any questions? I know that's quite a lot of information. Obviously, assessment centres can vary quite a bit, but hopefully that gave you a bit more detail into Allstate's current assessment centre format, which will likely be keeping for the end of the year anyway. I should mention that we should be going out with graduate opportunities towards the end of the year, around September or October. So we will be going out with an advertisement then for 2023. So that's not just necessarily for people who have graduated this year. It can be people that are in their final year and due to graduate quite soon in 2023. So do keep an eye out for that, and reach out if there's any questions. Again, our placement opportunities will likely come out towards the end of the year, maybe even a bit later, sort of November possibly. So again, placement opportunities for IT students, that will be. Our placement opportunities for corporate functions usually come out in the new year, so that they'll be slightly more towards the start of the new year.
And Clodagh, see, for whenever you're talking about the graduate roles, is there a cutoff as to how long, that you have graduated for, that you can still apply for those positions as a graduate? Do you know if they have a cutoff of how many years?
Yep, so at the moment, when our current advertisement, it was 2 years graduated. So we may review our criteria this time around. I can't just be confident on what we might put out in our next recruitment stage, but there will be it will encompass people who have maybe graduated a year or two and looking for a graduate position. So it will encompass some time. At this point, it probably will be 2 years.
Thanks. I see we have a question come in. So it's how to deal with fast-moving assessment that includes different kinds of tasks. So I'm thinking maybe that's to do with that prioritizing tasks that come in.
Yeah.
I suppose it's like, how do you keep yourself calm in that? And
yeah, and that's definitely part of the challenge, and it is what maybe makes assessment centres quite a challenging experience. So you might be faced, and likely could be faced with almost too much for the time, and that's sort of where it's up to you to kind of maybe prioritize certain things, or as I sort of say, what can be deferred, what could be delayed or delegated, and what is urgent, and what's the key things that need to be done. And maybe in reviewing the organization's sort of the job description perhaps, or their values and shared purpose, that might give you an indication as to what should be a priority, or what the sort of company's you know, stance on that would be. So you might be able to find by looking at the job description and what sort of competencies they're looking for, and that might help you in that prioritization of maybe having too many things to do within the time.
That's brilliant, thank you. Any other questions? Know that
And
we are,
just to
yeah,
mention the email addresses are there. So if there's maybe, if you do see our adverts coming out towards the end of the year and you have any questions, you know, feel free to reach out to myself.
that's brilliant. Like that's really useful. It's really helpful because I mean, we hear online assessments used, we know it's part of the recruitment process, but it's so helpful for students to see what that looks like when it's broken down and what types of activities they could be facing. And there's some really good, useful tips there about preparation. We do have, for Ulster University students, there are the online resources, but I suppose it is just bearing in mind that they're great, go in and practice and build your confidence up, but it's not expecting it to look exactly the same as what you see on those online assessment tools. They are there as a tool to help you prepare and get sort of familiar with doing those online tasks and online assessments, but each company will use their own versions, and as Clodagh rightly said, just about, you know, they will have different areas that they want to assess and therefore their assessments may look differently, but those tools are available for you there to help you in your preparation, and it is something that we will hopefully look to run during next year at some stage to help support students in terms of going for assessments, and particularly those group tasks as well. And I suppose just feeling a bit more comfortable in being thrown into a group of people that you don't know and given a task and how you engage and work through those different scenarios. So like, I just want to say a massive thank you, Clodagh, for taking the time out this morning. I'm sure the students really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you. And do take note of the email there and keep an eye out for those positions coming up in September time, September, October next, yeah, just after the summer. So thank you very much,
Yeah,
Clodagh.
and no problem at all. And just one final thing that I wanted to say is I know that assessments can be really daunting, especially if it is maybe in a group scenario. But I think our feedback is that people actually enjoy it because it's almost that peer support. It's people in the same position who want to help each other achieve. And just being able to sort of break the ice just with a conversation, or you know, just getting to know everybody, asking everybody's names. It's simple things like that that will help hopefully take some of the nerves away.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I have had students as well that have been surprised at how much they have enjoyed the assessment centre experience, more than they expected they were going to. So yeah, there is a sort of enjoyable element to them as well.
Yeah, hopefully so. Well, thank you everyone very much. It was